beginning of disc number 5, the deposition of Dr. Stэнli Plotkin. We are on the record. The time is 16:43.
Dr. Plotkin, I'm handing you what has been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 37 and 38. Are these letters also written by individuals who are very experienced in studying aluminum adjuvant?
Yes, well, one of the letters is from a French group, and I would point out that the French government...
Yes or no answer, Dr. Plotkin. We're trying to get it out of here, out of there.
Yes.
Okay, and is the content of these letters similar to that of the letter from Chris Shaw?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Plotkin, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 39. Okay. This is a study entitled Aluminum in the Brain Tissue in Autism, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and it was published in the Journal of Trace Elements in Medicine and Biology, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and it found, and according to its author, he found what he says is some of the highest values of aluminum in human tissue yet recorded in the brains of these autistic children who died prematurely, correct?
Well, I'd have to read the paper, but apparently that's the case.
Okay. And do you know that the standout observation in this study is that the aluminum that he found was in the immune cells of the brain, including within immune cells traveling into the brain?
Yes.
Okay.
But they were not associated with neurons.
They also found aluminum in the neurons as well, Dr. Plotkin, correct?
But mostly in other cells.
In immune-related cells, right? Immune system-related cells.
Cells that travel, yes.
Okay. What is encephalitis?
Inflammation of the brain.
What is encephalopathy?
Well, it's a vague term that means something's wrong with the brain.
And what is encephalomyelitis?
Inflammation of the brain.
Do all 5 of the deep tap containing vaccines sold in this country list encephalopathy within 7 days of a prior pertussis containing vaccine as a contraindication?
In other words, if encephalitis is present at the time of vaccination? Yes, I imagine so.
No, meaning that if there was encephalopathy within 7 days of a prior pertussis containing vaccination, that's a contraindication to getting more pertussis vaccination.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And do all 3 of the hepatitis A containing vaccines sold in this country list encephalitis or encephalopathy as a reported adverse reaction in section 6.2 of their product inserts?
Well, I don't know that for sure, but I imagine that it is a contraindication.
Do all 3 of the hepatitis B containing vaccines sold in this country list either encephalitis or encephalopathy as a reported adverse reaction in section 6.2 of their product insert?
Yes.
Do almost all of the flu vaccines sold in this country list encephalopathy or encephalitis? I'm sorry. Do almost all of the flu vaccines sold in this country list encephalopathy or encephalomyelitis as a reported adverse reaction in 6.2?
Yes.
Of their insert? Yes. Does the only chickenpox vaccine sold in this country list encephalitis as a reported adverse reaction in section?
Yes.
Okay. Why do you think brain swelling after vaccination is being reported in all of these vaccines?
Anything that happens after vaccination is included in contraindications. That they are related causally is not necessarily the case.
Mm-hmm. What is the total quantity of antigen in most pediatric vaccines?
Well, that's very variable. I mean, perhaps up to 50 milligrams. Depends entirely on the vaccine.
Minuscule amount, though? It's very tiny.
Yes.
I mean, it's almost... Could you even see it with the naked eye if you had it?
Yeah. You could
You
in
could, but
some
it's-
cases, yes.
Some cases. But for most vaccines, it would probably be very difficult.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any ingredients in vaccines that you're aware of that can damage neurons?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Are there any vaccines, any ingredients in vaccines that you're aware of that can damage human cells?
Oh, well, I mean, that depends on the concentrations and so forth. Human cells, of course, are susceptible to lots of substances, but again, it's very much dependent on the concentration.
Do any of the vaccines on the childhood schedule contain monkey kidney cells?
Well, the polio vaccine does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, I'll stop there.
Okay. Are the monkey kidneys used in making the polio vaccine removed from the monkey while the animal is still alive?
These days, much of the polio vaccine is produced in a continuous cell line derived from monkeys rather than from monkeys, from live monkeys, so to speak. I'm pretty sure that the iPol vaccine, for example, is produced in vero cells.
Okay. And when you say continuous cell line, what do you mean by that?
I mean a cell that grows continuously, derived from tissues that were normal tissues to begin with.
I'm sorry. Say that again, Doctor.
So they are cells that continue to multiply, unlike cells from let's say, from a kidney that will not continuously multiply. These are cells derived from the kidney that will continue to multiply and therefore can be used to make vaccines in.
Cells that continue to multiply unabated are typically considered cancerous, right?
Well, if it depends on the circumstances and the cells, but it's true that cancer cells do continue to replicate indefinitely. The vero cells are only used at certain passage levels. They're not used, 1,000 passages further on.
In relation to the amount of polio antigen in the final polio vaccine product, how much monkey kidney cell material is there in the final product? Is it about the same amount? Is there more monkey kidney cell? Is there less?
No, I can't give you a figure offhand, but I am pretty sure that the amount of polio antigen is superior to the amount of kidney antigen.
But you're not sure.
I don't recall the exact amounts.
Okay. Monkey cellular material remaining in the vaccine is considered either impurities or byproduct of the manufacturing process, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do any of the vaccines in the childhood vaccine schedule contain blood serum from calves or other bovines?
Well, frequently calf serum is used to make the vaccine, but calf serum is removed before the vaccine is used because you don't want to sensitize the vaccinee to cows.
Meaning if there was cow serum remaining in the vaccine, the child could develop antibodies to essentially cow products, and
Yes.
that would be, and they could develop an allergy to it, right?
If there were, yes.
If there were calf serum in the vaccines, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. But you're saying there's no calf serum in vaccines, right?
It is removed, yes.
Dr. Plotkin, I'm going to hand you what's in Marcus Plaintiff's Exhibit 40. What is this?
Vaccine excipient and media summary.
Okay, and who produces this document? The CDC, correct? Or the FDA?
I think it's the FDA.
Okay. And this lists the ingredients contained in various vaccines, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Can you go to Kinrix on the first page? That's Kinrix.
Yes.
DTaP IPV. Do you see in the third line down, it says calf serum?
Yeah, well, that is used to grow the polio virus.
Right, and this is one of the ingredients that remains in the vaccine.
I do not believe so.
Okay.
I mean, the vaccine, as I said, is made using calf serum as a nutrient, but is then
Removed, because otherwise it would be dangerous, you said, right?
Yes.
Can you go to the top of this document? You see it says, you know what? Let me ask you a few other questions, and then we'll come back to this document, Dr. Plotkin. A few quick questions, and we'll come back to it. Do any vaccines on the childhood schedule contain embryonic guinea pig cell cultures?
Embryonic guinea pig. I don't think any current vaccine is made in guinea pig cells. Varicella vaccine was passaged in guinea pig cells, but certainly not made in guinea pig cells.
Right. Do you know if any vaccines contain cow's milk in it, or products
Cow's
from
milk?
Any product derived from cow's milk? Any component derived from
Oh,
cow's
well,
milk?
it could be, casein, for example, could be,
Casein?
yes,
Casein, I think it's
could be used.
And Dr. Plotkin, and if there was casein in the vaccine, a child could become sensitized to that, correct?
Well, I'm not sure about that.
You're not sure anymore about that?
No, I
Yeah.
think there are other sensitizing things in calf serum.
Dr. Plotkin, can I see that 1 second? Let me make sure. Did I give you the right one? I'm not sure. That's different. So earlier you said, okay. So do any vaccines contain egg protein?
Oh, yes, influenza
And
vaccines.
do those remain in the final product?
I believe they do, yes. Not huge amounts, but there are traces, certainly.
Do any vaccines contain gelatin from pigs?
Yes.
Okay. Do any vaccines contain gelatin from cows?
Actually, I think in Muslim countries they have tried to do that. But mostly it's from pig.
Do any vaccines contain recombinant GMO yeast?
Recombinant GMOs. Yes, I imagine so, yes.
Are there any other animal products, parts, cells, material, or any other kind that you are aware of that are contained in any vaccine in the pediatric schedule?
Well, aside from trace amounts, no.
Yeah. Guys, unfortunately my 5 o'clock's here, so I gotta cut this short.
Well, we're not done. So we need to, So we're gonna. Can you come back tomorrow morning, Dr. Plotkin?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Well, counsel, we need to. How long is your? You need to move whatever you have right now, then, because
No, I don't.
I'm not done with the deposition.
Then to renotice it for a second day?
I don't know. The notice says from day to day. He's under subpoena. He needs to be here
No,
today.
he's not under
It's only 5 o'clock, and it says from day to day. So tomorrow's the next day.
If he's not available, he's not available. You guys can feel free to try and have him held in contempt while he's in Pennsylvania, but I gotta go.
How long are you available in a half an hour or something that we could take a short break?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, so then let us know when you're done. Half an hour. We'll start at 5:30 then, or if you get done earlier.
Jeez. What, does she have to be present?
Do you mind if we continue without you being present? Dr. Plotkin says he's fine with continuing without you.
As long as he's okay with that, that's fine with me. I think he's got a pretty good handle on things, so
Oh.
I'm not too concerned.
Okay, great. Then we'll continue.
All right.
Thank you.
Miss Newsom, if you wanted to rejoin the conversation, obviously you can dial back in, so.
Yeah, I'm just going to leave you guys on speaker in my office and do this in a conference room, and I'll do that.
Okay.
Do any vaccines on the childhood vaccine schedule contain MRC5 human diploid cells?
Yes.
What are these?
Rubella, varicella, hepatitis A. Let's see.
What are MRC5 cells?
They are human fibroblast cell strain.
Okay, and how were they created?
They were created by taking fetal tissue and from a particular fetus that was aborted by maternal choice, and the cells, the so-called fibroblast cells, were cultivated from that tissue. The fibroblast cells replicate for about 50 passages and then die.
So MRC5 cells are the cultured cell lines from aborted fetal tissue?
They're not cell lines.
What are they?
Cell strains cultivated from an aborted fetus, yes.
So cell strains from an
Yes.
aborted fetus?
Yeah, they're not immortal.
Okay, so they live for 5 generations and then they die?
About 50 generations,
About 50 generations and then they die?
yes.
And then how is more MRC5 created?
Well, a seed stock is made of early passage cells so that one can go back to the seed stock, which is, let's say, at the more or less the 8th passage, and make new cells at the 20th passage and use those to make the vaccine.
Okay. And so these cell strains are human cells?
Yes.
Okay. Do any vaccines on the childhood vaccine schedule contain WI38 human diploid lung fibroblasts?
Well, they used to, but I don't think anything is made in those cells anymore. They've been replaced by MRC5.
So you're not aware of any vaccine that has in its final formulation WI38 human diploid lung fibroblasts?
Well, as I said, at one point in the past, RA273, for example, rubella vaccine was grown in WI38, but the supply is insufficient, so MRC5 is now used.
Okay. And and WI38 was created from an aborted fetus?
Yes,
They took the lung tissue from the aborted fetus,
yes,
and from that they've grown this cell line, correct?
yes.
Okay.
Cell strain.
Cell strain. And is this cell line immortal?
No.
Do any vaccines on the childhood vaccine schedule contain human albumin?
Oh, yes.
Okay. What is human albumin?
Human albumin is part of human serum.
And what is human serum?
What is human serum? Human serum is part of the blood that is liquid.
Right. It's the non-red blood cell part of the
Yes.
blood, right? From where was it obtained?
The human serum?
Yes.
Well, that would be variable from donors who are healthy donors. That's all I could say to that.
How is it used in the manufacturing process?
I'm sorry?
How is it used in the manufacturing process?
Well, serum is used to keep cells healthy during the process of making a vaccine. So in other words, since the vaccines, or some vaccines, have to be grown in cells, you have to keep the cells in a good state.
Mm-hmm. So the cells that are to use the virus or bacteria, the virus is used in some of the the virus is used in some of the vaccines are grown in this human blood component.
Well, yes, I believe that the serum is removed in the final product, but certainly it's important to keep the cells healthy during the manufacture of the vaccine.
Do you think that, so none of it remains in the final product?
I don't believe so, no.
Yeah, because that could be problematic, right?
Well, it could be. I mean, if the individual is not healthy.
Right, or if maybe some of the, human blood components bind to some of the aluminum and develop antibodies, self-antibodies, correct?
If they develop antibodies against a serum component, that would not be good.
Right. What do any vaccines contain human material in them that? I'm sorry, strike that. Apologies. Do any vaccines on the childhood vaccine schedule contain recombinant human albumin?
Yes.
Okay. What is this?
Sorry?
What is recombinant human albumin?
It's albumin.
Sorry. Recombinant human albumin. That's ALBUMIN. Yep.
Yeah, so it's a component of human serum which is useful to stabilize cells and keep them healthy. And it's made by genetic engineering.
Okay, so it's genetically engineered human serum, basically.
A part of human serum, yes.
Are these genetically engineered protein structures?
Yes, and the idea was to eliminate any possibility of a contaminant from human albumin obtained from donors. So it's made in cells using the DNA for albumin, and that way one can be sure that there's no contaminant.
And again, you pretty much want to make sure that none of that remained in the final product too, right?
Well, human albumin is probably not much of a problem in terms of causing reactions. So,
but in terms of it potentially binding to the alum, that could be problematic, correct?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. The vaccines that contain human material in them, they also contain human DNA and protein, correct?
They may, yes.
Okay. Isn't it true that human DNA in vaccines is typically purposely fragmented to below 500 base pairs in length?
Yes, one doesn't, I would say mostly for theoretical reasons, doesn't want to put DNA into intact DNA into vaccines.
Okay.
I think the actual risk is zero, but that's my opinion.
Isn't it true that MMR2 contains approximately 150 nanograms cell substrate, double-strand DNA, and single-strand DNA per dose, purposely fragmented to approximately 215
Yeah.
base pairs in length?
Yeah, that's probably correct, yes.
Okay. And is it true that Varivax, vaccine for chickenpox, is manufactured using WI38 and MRC5 and
Yes.
contains approximately 2 micrograms of cell substrate? No problem. And
Just wait for the whole thing too, doctor, please.
and contains approximately 2 micrograms of cell substrate, double-stranded DNA, or approximately 1 trillion fragments of human DNA.
It may be true.
Isn't it true that Havrix, a hepatitis A vaccine, also contains millions of fragments of human DNA?
Likely.
Do you know whether strands of DNA below 500 base pairs are now known to insert themselves into living cells with which they come into contact?
I do not have that information, but the likelihood that they would be genetically included in the genome of vaccinees, in my view, is zero.
Do you have a study to support that view?
I do not have a study that supports that view, but it is, to me, unlikely that the DNA would travel from the site of injection to the semen or the ovaries.
Could it insert itself into DNA and even in the muscle tissue, or if it gets into the blood, into?
Theoretically, but that's not going to mean that it's going to have any impact on the individual.
Are you familiar with insertional mutagenesis?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any study to show that injecting millions of pieces of human DNA into babies and children is safe?
The only studies are all the safety studies that have been done on vaccines.
Okay. And you can produce those studies, right?
Well, those studies are available from the manufacturers and from CDC, and I'm not aware of any data showing that a heritable characteristic was transmitted by a vaccine.
Mm-hmm. So you don't personally don't know of any study that shows the safety of injecting millions of pieces of human DNA into babies?
Such studies are general safety studies, and I haven't yet seen a vaccinee develop a new genetic trait as a result of vaccination.
It's possible that it can cause cancer.
Anything is possible, but there are no data to support that.
Is there data to show that it doesn't do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Observations made over millions of vaccinees.
Okay. And you have the study to show that, right?
The studies are easily available in terms of vaccine safety studies that have been done by many, many people.
Excellent. Then it should be very easy for you to direct me to those and provide
Yes,
copies.
you can
Wonderful.
read the chapter on vaccine safety.
Vaccines contain dead or weakened poliovirus, correct?
IPV does, yes.
Okay. Beginning in the 1950s, polio vaccines were routinely grown on non-human primate kidney cells, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware of any simian, monkey, viruses, meaning viruses that come from primates, that contaminated polio vaccines and infected individuals receiving the polio vaccine?
Yes, SV40,
Okay. And what does SV40 stand for?
simian virus 40.
Okay. And was it the 40th simian virus found? Is that why
Yes.
it's called? Okay. Are you aware of any other simian viruses that are in any vaccine?
At this stage, no.
Okay. Are you aware of any bovine virus that is in any vaccine?
Bovine virus. Nothing comes to mind at the moment.
Are you aware of any virus from any animal other than simian or bovine that is in any vaccine?
Yes, there's a pig virus present in one of the rotavirus vaccines,
What's that virus called?
circovirus.
Circo.
Yes.
Is there more than one type, or is there only one?
Oh, there's more than one type, but I think only one was recovered from the vaccine.
Uh-huh. Which one is that?
I think it was 2.
Circovirus 2?
I think so.
Are you aware of any retroviruses that are in any vaccine?
Retroviruses? No.
You aware of any prions that are in any vaccine?
No.
Are you aware of any human viruses that are in any vaccine apart from the virus for which the vaccine is intended?
No.
You indicated that they did find a porcine circovirus type 2 in rotavirus, correct?
Yes.
Was that unintentional?
Yes.
When it was released to the market, they didn't know that virus was in there, correct?
Correct.
And then when they released the polio vaccine on the market, they didn't know SV40 was in there, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware of how many micrograms of 2-phenoxyethanol, how do you
Oh,
pronounce it?
2-phenoxyethanol.
Yeah. Are you aware of how many micrograms of 2-phenoxyethanol a child following the childhood vaccine schedule would be injected with?
No, I'd have to look that up.
Do you think it's close to around 100 micrograms?
It could be, but I'd have to look it up.
Do you know the safe level in terms of that ingredient?
I am not aware that there is toxicity associated with 2-phenoxyethanol. It's a
Okay.
fairly harmless substance as far as I'm aware.
Do you know any vaccines on the childhood schedule that include ferric nitrate?
Ferric nitrate. No, I don't recall that.
Are you aware of how many micrograms of polysorbate 80 a child following the vaccine schedule will be injected with?
I don't have the amount, no.
Now, I'm going to give you back Exhibit 40, Dr. Plotkin. Take a look at that a moment. You indicated that you weren't aware that WI-38 was in the final vaccine product. If you could turn to page 3 for MMR and MMRV. Do you see that within the ingredient list that lists WI-38, human diploid lung fibroblasts?
Yes, I do see that.
Okay. I believe that of the ingredients that we discussed till now, the rest of them you indicated you are aware are in vaccines except for, are there any ingredients we've discussed till now that you believe are not in vaccines?
Well, I'd have to go back over all the questions you asked, but I do want to say that WI-38, as I said before, was the original fibroblast cell line, and I think that manufacturers have shifted to MRC5, but WI-38 could still be used, and I don't see anything wrong with that.
Are there any vaccine ingredients that are not listed on the FDA's official vaccine excipient and media summary table that you're aware of?
I don't see how I can really answer that question without reading the whole thing, but I imagine that it's a complete list.
Okay. Isn't it true that an adjuvant will bind not only to the target antigen, but also to the impurities and byproduct of the manufacturing process?
Probably yes.
Okay. Okay. And those impurities and byproducts are all listed in what has been marked as exhibit number 40, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Once the impurities or byproducts are bound to the aluminum, the body may also develop antibodies to these impurities and byproducts, correct?
May is the operative word, but not necessarily.
Okay. The entire purpose of the aluminum binding to a protein structure, be it an antigen or some other protein structure, is to cause an immune response that
Yes,
will develop
but-
antibodies, correct?
Yes, but the protein has to be of the right size and presentation in order to induce an immune response. And that will not always be the case if the protein is small or is something not recognized by the human immune system.
Do you know whether the protein structure for any of the ingredients on Exhibit 40 are not the right size to bind to alum?
Well, I think it's unlikely that monosodium glutamate, for example, will cause an immune response. I have to look through the whole thing, but amino acids probably are unlikely to induce an immune response.
Anything else?
You want me to read this whole
Well, no,
thing?
I'm just asking, I mean, in terms of just the stuff that's got protein structures in it.
Well, things like calf serum, if they were present, would possibly induce an immune response. But the things on this list, the vast majority of them are unlikely to do so.
Because they're not protein structures.
They're not proteins, or they're very small.
Okay. Other than the, strike that. How about, and we talked earlier, human albumin, that would be of a big enough protein structure to bind to alum, correct?
It could, although the fact that it's human means that individuals might well not respond to, that is, not respond to human albumin as a foreign protein.
Right, maybe not alone, right, but bound to alum, then it might, correct?
It might, but I'm not aware of evidence that it does.
Are you aware of a study that looked at that issue?
I have not read such a study, no.
Okay. How about the human DNA? Do you believe that the human DNA strands can bind to the alum?
No.
Why is that?
I don't see any chemical reason why it should.
Any reason why it shouldn't?
Proving a negative is always more difficult.
Well, I'm just trying to know if you know or you're not sure. That's all. I'm not asking. I'm just saying if you don't know, just say you don't know. That's
I have
fine.
no reason to believe that DNA will bind to albumin.
But you don't know for sure.
I have not done the experiment, no.
Okay. And do you know whether it will bind to any of the cellular debris from MRC5 or WI38?
whether human albumin would bind?
No, whether alum would bind to MRC5 or any of the cellular debris that's in the final product from MRC5.
I think it could, but I don't know that it does.
Do you know whether alum could bind to any of the cellular debris from WI38?
It might, but I don't know that for a fact.
Do you know whether alum would bind to any of the gelatin from pigs?
I think that's unlikely.
Why is that?
I don't think that alum will bind to gelatin, but I don't know that for a fact.
What about egg protein? Could alum bind to egg protein?
Possibly.
And to casein?
I suppose it's possible, but I'm not aware of any evidence.
Which you don't know.
I don't know.
Okay. In your work related to vaccines, how many fetuses have been part of that work?
My own personal work, 2.
2. So in all of your work related to vaccines throughout your whole career, you've only ever worked with 2 fetuses?
In terms of making vaccines, yes. Yes.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked Plaintiff's Exhibit 41. Okay? Are you familiar with this article, Dr. Plotkin?
Yes.
Okay. Are you listed as an author on this article?
Yes.
Okay. This study took place at the Wistar Institute, correct?
Yes.
You were at the Wistar Institute, correct?
Yes.
How many fetuses were used in the study described in this article?
Quite a few, but my answer to the previous question was, what did I use to make vaccines? And the answer was 2.
Can you read back the question I had asked?
Just now?
No, prior.
In your work related to vaccines, how many fetuses have been part of that work? Answer: my own personal work, 2.
Okay. So I'm going to ask that question again. In your work related to vaccines, how many fetuses were involved in that work?
There were only 2 fetuses involved in making vaccines. When fetal strains, fibroblast strains, were first developed, I was involved in that work trying to characterize those cells, but they were not used to make vaccines.
Wasn't the purpose of this study to help develop a human cell line or to support the use of human cell lines in the creation of vaccines?
The idea was to study the cell strains from fetuses to determine whether or not they could be used to make vaccines.
Okay. So this was related to your work?
Well, yes, in a sense,
to
yes.
vaccines, correct?
Yes. It was preparatory.
Okay. So this study involved 74 fetuses, correct?
I don't remember exactly how many.
Turn to page 12 of the study.
You know, 76.
76.
Mhm.
And these fetuses were all 3 months or older when aborted, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And these were all normally developed fetuses, correct?
yes,
Okay. These included fetuses that were aborted for social and psychiatric reasons, correct?
correct.
What organs did you harvest from these fetuses?
Well, I didn't personally harvest any, but a whole range of tissues were harvested by co-workers.
Okay. And these pieces were then cut up into little pieces, right?
Yes,
And they were cultured?
yes,
Okay. Some of the pieces of the fetuses were pituitary gland that were chopped up into pieces to.
Mhm.
Okay. Included the lung of the fetuses.
yes,
Okay. Included the skin,
yes,
kidney,
yes,
spleen,
yes,
heart,
yes.
okay, and tongue.
I don't recall, but yeah, probably yes.
So I just want to make sure I understand. In your entire career, and this was just one study, so I'm going to ask you again. In your entire career, how many fetuses have you worked with?
Well, I don't remember
Approximately.
the exact number, but quite a few when we were studying them originally before we decided to use them to make vaccines.
Do you have any sense? I mean, this one study had 76. How many other studies did you have that you used aborted fetuses for?
Oh, I don't remember how many.
You're aware? Are you aware that one of the objections to vaccination by the plaintiff in this case is the inclusion of aborted fetal tissue in the development of vaccines and the fact that it's actually part of the ingredients of vaccines?
Yeah, I'm aware of those objections.
Okay.
The Catholic Church has actually issued a document on that which says that individuals who need the vaccine should receive the vaccines regardless of the fact, and that I think it implies that I am the individual who will go to hell because of the use of aborted tissues, which I am glad to do.
Okay. Do you know if the mother is Catholic?
I have no idea.
Okay.
So, but she should consult her priest.
If she has if she's in fact Christian, I guess, right? In any event, so we have 76 in this study. Would you approximate it's been a few hundred fetuses?
Oh no, I don't think it was that many.
Okay.
It was probably not many more than in this paper.
Uh-huh.
And I should stipulate that we had nothing to do with the cause of the abortion.
Mm-hmm. Some of these were for psychiatric institutions, correct?
Actually, all I can say is that the fetuses that I personally worked with actually came from Sweden, from a Swedish co-worker. And so I, in no case, was able to determine what exactly the reason for the abortion was.
I'm just asking you, some of the fetuses that you did use did come from abortions from people who were in psychiatric institutions, correct?
I don't know that. What I'm telling you is that I got them from a co-worker, and if it's stated in the paper, it's true, but otherwise I do not know.
Okay, so if it's in the paper, you don't contest it, right?
I don't contest it, no.
Okay. Have you ever used orphans to study an experimental vaccine?
Yes.
Have you ever used the mentally handicapped to study an experimental vaccine?
I don't recollect ever doing studies in mentally handicapped individuals. at the time, in the 1960s, it was not an uncommon practice.
So, you're saying, I'm not clear on your answer, I'm sorry. Have you ever used the mentally handicapped to study an experimental vaccine?
What I'm saying is I don't recall specifically having done that, but that in the 1960s it was not unusual to do that, and I wouldn't deny that I may have done so.
Okay. Oh, we've already marked this.
I know, but that was wrong.
Okay.
That's the task force.
I'm going to read you a sentence from what's been previously marked as
No, that wasn't it.
Exhibit 7.
That's not what got marked as Exhibit 7. That got, the task force was 7.
Oh,
So this should be 42.
got it.
Does that make sense?
Okay. So, and well, in any event, you're not denying that you there's an article entitled "Attenuation of RA27.3 Rubella Virus in WI38 Human Diploid Cells." Are you familiar with that article?
Yes.
In that article, one of the things it says is one of the things it says is 13 seronegative mentally retarded children were given RA27.3 vaccine.
Okay, well, then that's, in that case, that's what I did.
Okay. Have you ever expressed that it's better to perform experiments on those less likely to be able to contribute to society, such as children with handicap, than with children without or adults without handicaps?
I don't remember specifically, but it's possible. And again, I repeat that in the 1960s, that was more or less common practice. I've since changed my mind, but that was a long time ago.
Do you remember ever writing to the editor of Ethics on Human Experimentation?
I don't remember specifically, but I may well have.
Okay. We'll mark this. Yeah. I'm going to hand you what's marked as Exhibit 43. Do you recognize this letter you wrote to the editor?
Yes.
Okay. Did you write this letter?
Yes.
Okay. Is one of the things you wrote, the question is whether we are to have experiments performed on fully functioning adults and on children who are potentially contributors to society, or to perform initial studies in children and adults who are human in form but not in social potential.
Yes.
Okay. It may be objected that this question implies a Nazi philosophy, but I do not think that it is difficult to distinguish non-functioning persons from members of ethnic, racial, economic, or other groups.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have you ever used babies of mothers in prison to study an experimental vaccine?
Yes.
Have you ever used individuals under colonial rule to study an experimental vaccine?
Yes.
Did you do so in the Belgian Congo?
Yes.
Did that experiment involve almost 1 million people?
Well, all right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you ever visit what was the Belgian Congo and Urundi?
Yes.
How many times?
Once.
Yes. RUANDA-URUNDI. When was that visit?
1959.
And how long were you there?
No, a couple of months.
2 months?
I think so, yes.
Could it have been longer?
No, I don't think it was
2 months.
longer than
Okay.
that.
What places did you visit?
What was then called Leopoldville, Stanleyville, Kivu,
Kivu?
yes.
Kivu?
Yes, Burundi.
Okay.
Miss Newsom, are you back?
I am.
Uh-huh.
There could have been a couple of other places, but I don't remember.
Okay. I've heard you talk. I've heard in some of your speeches. You remember this trip fondly. Right?
Well, fondly may not be the right word, but I do remember it as an important event.
Yeah. In what order did you visit the places you just told me? Which one do you think you visited first?
Leopoldville,
Okay, and then after that,
Stanleyville,
then
then the eastern part of the Congo.
is that Kivu?
Yeah,
Okay.
and Bukavu.
You stole it.
Is that before or after Burundi?
Before.
Can you spell those?
Can you spell Bukavu?
Bukavu.
So Leopoldville, then Stanleyville, then Kivu, Bukum, and then Burundi. So how long were you in Leopoldville?
Oh gosh, I can't answer that question.
Approximately?
I don't remember. A couple of weeks probably.
Okay, and then how long in Stanleyville?
I don't know, 3-4 weeks. I can't possibly remember that far back.
And then how long in Kivu approximately?
Oh, short time.
Okay, and then Bakum,
I'm sorry?
Bukum,
Oh, Bukavu?
Bukavu.
I don't know.
Bay.
Pronunciations aren't matching up.
Oh, Bukuvu.
Bukavu.
AAVU, sorry. Bukavu. Approximately how long?
A couple of days.
Okay, and then finally Burundi.
Again, I don't know, maybe a week, I'm not sure.
Okay. What were you doing in Leopoldville?
I was examining the data on oral polio vaccination in the city.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Did you vaccinate anybody?
Personally, no.
Okay. How about what were you doing in Stanleyville?
I was visiting the chimpanzee laboratory and talking to scientists in Stanleyville.
Talking about what?
Well, about polio mainly.
Okay, what about polio?
What about polio? Obviously, they were having polio, and we're talking about how to protect the people against polio.
Okay. And did you vaccinate anybody while you were in Stanleyville personally?
Personally, no.
Okay. What did you do in Kivu?
As I recall, I just visited the place.
Any purpose?
I don't think so, no.
Did you vaccinate anybody
That
personally?
was a
I'm sorry.
scenic area.
Okay. Did you vaccinate anybody personally there?
No.
Okay. What about Bukavu?
I did not do any vaccination there either.
And what were you doing there?
I was just visiting.
Like a tourist?
Yes,
Same thing with Kivu as a tourist?
yes.
And what about Burundi?
Well, there I had some discussions with scientists
Okay, about what?
about polio.
Okay. Did you, other than that, did you do anything else in Burundi?
No,
Did you vaccinate anybody personally?
no,
During your entire trip, did you vaccinate anybody personally?
no,
So your whole trip to Belgian Congo and Rwanda, Burundi, you never vaccinated anybody personally.
That is correct. I also stopped in Kikwit, which was to observe a vaccination campaign.
And that was between what cities?
Well, geographically, it's between Leopoldville and Stanleyville. I don't recall in what order I visited it.
You don't know if it was before or after Stanleyville?
No, I don't.
How long were you in Kikwit?
Well, just a day or two.
And that was just to observe a
Vaccination campaign.
Did you observe a vaccination campaign in any of the other cities?
Stanleyville, probably. Leopoldville was, as I said before, to collect data from prior vaccination.
Okay. And what were you doing in Rwanda, Urundi?
Talking to people,
Again, about polio vaccine,
yes,
but not vaccinating anybody.
no,
Not part of any vaccination campaign there either?
no.
Okay. Do you believe that someone can have a valid religious objection to refusing a vaccine?
No,
Do you take issue with religious beliefs?
yes,
You have said that, quote, vaccination is always under attack by religious zealots who believe that the will of God includes death and disease.
yes,
You stand by that statement?
I absolutely do.
Okay. Are you an atheist?
Yes,
Do you accept that some people hold religious beliefs that are inherently unprovable?
yes, I'm sure they do.
Okay. You've said that, quote, vaccination is always under attack by a legal system that profits from the failure of most people to understand risk-benefit ratios or public health issues. Correct?
Yes.
Can you explain what you mean by that shortly?
I mean that the risk from vaccines, for example, is considerably less than the risk from disease, but people don't necessarily understand that. It's similar to the situation where people may not fly, but they're willing to drive in cars, where the risks are much higher. And what was the second point about?
Public health issues.
Public health issues, yes. Not understanding the importance of a high vaccination coverage in prevention of disease.
One child can make a difference.
One child probably doesn't make a difference, but a collection of one child's do make a difference.
At the most recent ACIP meeting, you spoke and gave ACIP 3 pieces of advice, correct?
Yes,
Right. One of them was to conduct more vaccine safety studies to prove the anti-vaccinationists wrong, right?
yes, correct.
Okay. If the science to prove vaccines safe already exists, why would more safety studies be needed to prove the anti-vaccinationists wrong?
Because there are so many people, as you can see on the web, who have these beliefs about vaccines, and as we have discussed throughout this long day, it would be valuable to have more safety data.
Like a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study, correct?
If such a study is feasible.
Shouldn't vaccine safety studies be done for the sake of making vaccines safer, not for the purpose and with the predetermined objective of proving so-called anti-vaccinationists wrong?
Oh, absolutely. I do not deny that there are known reactions to vaccines. Fortunately, they are rarely serious, but I support more research on every aspect of vaccines.
And your claim that they're rarely serious is from your book, right?
Yes.
Okay. When's the last time that you received a vaccine, Dr. Plotkin?
Influenza vaccine. Actually, not more than several weeks ago.
Do you get the flu shot every year?
Yes.
You ever missed a year?
No.
Have you received the zoster vaccine? It sounds like you have.
Yes.
The what vaccine?
The zoster, ZOSTER. When did you receive that?
I've received now 2 doses, and I'm looking forward to receiving the new zoster vaccine as soon as I can buy it.
Have you received a PCV13 vaccine?
Yes.
Have you received a PPSV23 vaccine?
Yes.
Hep B vaccine?
Yes.
Let me do that again. Have you received a Hep B vaccine?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you received a hepatitis A vaccine?
Yes.
Have you received a MEN ACWY or MPS V4 vaccine?
I believe so. That was a long time in the past because those vaccines have been available for a long time. I'd have to check my records, but I think particularly when I traveled to Africa, I believe I took it.
Have you received a MEN B vaccine?
Not yet, no.
Have you received a Hib vaccine?
Oh, Hib, well, no, I was long past the age of Hib when it was developed.
When's the last time you got a tetanus diphtheria containing vaccine?
Oh, within the last 10 years. I don't remember exactly when, but
Do you think all adults should be required to receive all vaccines on the CDC's adult immunization schedule?
That's somewhat of a difficult question because adults, of course, have the ability to make their own decisions. Tetanus is a vaccine that, how shall I put it? I guess it's a choice whether you're willing to be susceptible to tetanus or not. For pertussis, I think there's increasing reason to say that all adults should be vaccinated against pertussis. So it's, let's say, open to discussion at this point for DTAP anyway.
You'd support a law that would require adults to get the DTAP?
At this point, 2017, I wouldn't insist on that for all adults. I would insist on it for children and adolescents. But the data, the reason I say that is because the data showing protection against pertussis in older adults is really not that solid, not that available.
Did you ever experience an adverse vaccine reaction?
Personally?
Yes.
No.
Have you ever witnessed someone experience an adverse vaccine reaction?
I've witnessed people fainting after vaccination.
Anything else?
Certainly I've seen people complain of pain at the injection site. And in the rubella days, women complaining of joint pains after vaccination. I think that's it.
When you say fainting, after what vaccine was that?
Oh, actually, that was tetanus, as I recall. It was a high school athlete.
Do you know anyone that's experienced a serious adverse reaction? And
Personally, no.
Yeah. Did your grandchildren receive the hepatitis B vaccine on the first day of life as recommended by the
course.
CDC?
I'm sorry, say the question again.
Yeah. I asked if his grandchildren have your grandchildren received the hepatitis B vaccine on the first day of life as recommended by the CDC? And he answered yes. Do you think there's a safe threshold of how many vaccines can be administered at one time?
My answer to that is I don't know. I don't think there's any evidence that the 6 that are currently generally given together is a problem. So I don't know if eventually there's some theoretical threshold, but I am not aware of any evidence for that yet.
Okay. But before you would say, for example, getting 30 vaccines on one day was safe, you'd probably want to get the data to support it?
Yes.
Okay. That data doesn't yet exist, obviously, right?
No.
Okay. Do you intend to appear at trial in this matter to testify?
No, I do not.
Do you intend to appear via video conference to testify in this trial?
Well,
In
I
this
haven't
case?
been asked. I suppose I might consider a video conference, but no one has asked me, and I'm not, I would say, very inclined to do that. And you know, while we're on the tape, so to speak, I want to stipulate, since you were so interested in my income, that I'm doing this pro bono.
Mm-hmm. But as you sit here today, you're still receiving remuneration from all 4 major vaccine makers, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And from... So, we're getting close to the end. Okay. I don't have much left. A few more. There was a controversy revolving around the origin of AIDS and the OPV vaccine, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You disputed any connection between OPV vaccine and AIDS in 2 papers submitted to the Royal Society, in which you stated, quote, there was no gun, the chimpanzees, no bullet, the virus, no shooter, a manufacturer of the vaccine chimpanzee cells, right, and no motive to use chimp cells or to hide the fact. Correct?
Yeah, I also said that the only smoke was created by Mr. Hooper.
Right. Who is that?
He's a British journalist, which puts him at the lower end of journalism.
I'm gonna mark this. Dr. Plotkin, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 44. And I'm also going to hand you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 45.
Yep.
Okay. Are these the 2 papers that you submitted to the Royal Society
Yes.
disputing, one second please, disputing any connection between the OPV vaccine and AIDS?
Yes.
Right? Okay. Is everything that you wrote in these 2 articles, strike that, is everything written in the 2 articles, Royal Society articles that you submitted, which are marked as exhibits 40, 44 and 45, true?
Well, I certainly hope so.
Is that, I'm sorry, Dr. Plotkin, is that yes?
Yes. Yes, and I should also add that my conclusions have been verified by other scientists who now have shown that HIV originated in the 1920s in Cameroon.
At the end of, which one was 44 and 45? Sorry. Okay. Dr. Dr. Plotkin, at the end of Exhibit 44, the article entitled Untruths and Consequences, you state that, strike that. I apologize. I sorry, Dr. Plotkin. Can you look at Exhibit 45? I'm sorry. At the end of Exhibit 45, it states that letters cited in this paper will be deposited in the library of the College of Physicians of Philadelphia or the University of Leuven, correct?
Yes.
That's Leuven. Have you deposited those letters and papers?
I have, yes.
Okay, when did you deposit all of those letters and papers?
Oh gosh, it's probably at least 5 years ago now.
So all of the letters cited in this document have been deposited in
The
where?
College of Physicians of Philadelphia.
And they're in possession of all of the letters cited in this document?
Well, I believe so. I have to go over the list, but that certainly was my intention, and I believe I have done so.
Okay. Is that publicly available at the University of Philadelphia?
That's a good question. I imagine so. I deposited them there basically so that they could be examined after I'm dead. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never been asked.
Okay. If they're not publicly available, would you provide copies?
Well, I have to ask the College of Physicians to do that.
Would you authorize them to release copies?
I'd authorize them, sure.
Okay. If you could please take a look at
I'm not sure why you're asking the question. Are you
I'm asking the
accusing me
question.
of launching AIDS, or what is the point?
Absolutely not, Dr. Plotkin. You made a promise in here to deposit papers, and I'm purely asking you if you fulfilled that promise.
Yes, I did.
That's it. That's all. Yeah. Okay. I'm not accusing you of anything. And in the other paper entitled Untruths and Consequences, in the second paragraph, it says, the evidence I present is based on papers and documents of the time for my personal files. Have those also been deposited in the Library of Philadelphia?
No, certainly not all of them. I have extensive files. I don't throw anything out.
So you still have all of those?
Yes.
I assume you don't have an issue sharing copies of those?
No, my wife would love to get rid of all of them, but
Okay.
I don't.
So you said that the AIDS OPV hypothesis hypothesis has been disproven, correct?
Yes.
Okay. A few quick questions. Just approximately how many human samples that predate 1959 have been tested for HIV?
That predate 1959. I don't know that there are any such samples available. The first samples that I recall being available were from 1960, and they had already some HIV seropositive individuals, but that was in Leopoldville, and they were individuals who had not received the oral polio vaccine.
Mm-hmm. So, but in terms of samples that predate 1959, have there been any such samples tested for HIV?
I I have to think about that. Oh, well, there have been samples from elsewhere in the world, but from the Belgian Congo,
Yeah.
I don't think that any such samples have been available.
Are you aware of whether there currently exist any samples of polio vaccine that was in the Belgian Congo at any time between 1959 and 1960?
Whether the Wistar has kept them or not, I don't know. Fortunately, at the time of the Royal Society, I was able to go to Wistar and find specimens that had been used in the Congo, or from the same lot that had been used in the Congo. But whether that still exists or not, I have no idea.
Well, I'm curious, is there any samples that were actually in the Belgian Congo that you're aware of?
That were tested?
That were tested? I really don't know the answer to that question. The vaccine that was used, the oral polio vaccine that was used, I believe was entirely used up in the vaccination campaign. So I don't think it's likely that material used in the vaccination campaign was repatriated. But fortunately, we had material from the same lots that were used in the Congo, and that had been retained at the Wistar. But as far as you're aware, in terms of actual samples, a sample that was actually in the Belgian Congo, are you saying you're not aware of any such sample?
No, I'm not aware of any such sample.
Do you know if any such sample are you aware of any such sample that existed after 1960?
I'm not aware that anything existed.
Okay. I just have another question on this. Just curious. So, are you familiar with an article entitled "Vaccination with the Chat strain of type 1 attenuated poliomyelitis virus in Leopoldville,
Yes.
Belgian Congo"?
Yes.
Okay. In the article, you're one of the authors of the article?
Yes.
Okay. Where is it? Oh, so on page 2 of this article, it states the titer of the vaccine after a day's use was checked periodically by sending frozen
Aliquots, yes.
Thank you. Aliquots to the ALIQUOTS to the Wistar Institute, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, it means that in order to be sure that the vaccine used still contained enough virus, they sent back samples to be titered for the quantity of virus.
So they sent back samples of the oral
Yes.
polio being used in
Yes.
the Belgian Congo.
Yes.
And they did that periodically.
Yes.
But to your knowledge, none of those survived after 1960?
No, I think they were tested and then discarded. I mean, aside from legal value, they would have had no value because they were used. They could not ever be used again, so they would have been discarded.
It'd be helpful for you if some of those were saved, right?
It would have been, yes, but at the time, nobody thought about that.
If such a sample were to have survived someplace
Yeah.
on the planet, where would you think that would be?
Difficult to say. The laboratory in Stanleyville no longer exists. I have no idea where it could be.
Do you think such a sample will ever be located?
I doubt it.
Last question on this topic, and we'll move on. Did you or any of your Y-Star colleagues ever carry any human cells, such as WISH or WI1 or polio vaccines grown in such human cells to the Belgian Congo?
No. Well, at least I certainly have not.
Okay. Are you aware of any such
No.
vaccines
I am not aware of
being...
any. No, I am not aware of those cells being carried to the Congo. If they had been, it would have been for experimental purposes, certainly not for vaccination purposes.
So you're not aware they're being carried or used there, right?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Isn't it true that in 2014 the FDA announced, quote, although individuals immunized with an acellular pertussis vaccine may be protected from disease, they may still become infected with the bacteria without always getting sick and are able to spread infection to others, end quote.
Yes, that's on the basis of the studies in baboons.
Okay, that's the Warfel study?
Yes.
All right, and we discussed earlier that the baboons would probably be the best surrogates for humans, right?
Yes.
Because you couldn't ethically expose humans to pertussis, correct?
Right.
So the Warfel studies would be the best evidence as Warfel, W-A-R-F-E-L. Would the Warfel studies, the one in 2014 and 2016, which were conducted by the FDA, correct?
Yes.
Those would be the best evidence as to the ability to whether or not a cellular pertussis vaccine prevents infection and transmission of pertussis, correct?
Yes.
And I think we talked about this earlier. In your estimation, what % of adults would you say are actually immune to pertussis?
It's a very good question, and I don't know the answer to that because immunity to pertussis is complex. And so just measuring serum wouldn't necessarily give you a firm idea as to what percentage of adults are immune. But judging from the frequency of pertussis in adults, I don't think the immunity level is very high because clearly adults are getting pertussis.
Could you estimate what percentage of the adult population in the United States you think is immune to pertussis?
Immune? Well, I think probably 50–60% could be immune, but it's difficult because immunity wanes.
Right.
And so people become susceptible again. And as I've said now twice, there is a lot of pertussis in adults, that's been shown. So quite a significant proportion of adults are susceptible and not immune.
50 to 60% is your highest estimation,
Yes.
It sounded like, right?
Yes.
No more than that.
I don't think so.
Okay. The diphtheria vaccine creates antibodies only to a toxin released by the diphtheria bacteria, correct?
Correct.
It doesn't create any antibodies to the actual diphtheria bacteria itself.
Yes, that's true, but it is also true, it certainly appears to be true, that if the organism can't produce a toxin, it has a great difficulty in surviving. And so the observation is that where the vaccine is used, the organism disappears. Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult to find it in the US, for example, but in Russia, where vaccination has not been always complete, there are still cases of diphtheria.
How do you define anti-vaccinationists or anti-vaxxers as you've used them here today?
How do I define them?
Yeah, what does that mean to you? You use those terms, and I'm actually not
They are
exactly sure what you
people-
mean by that.
People opposed to vaccination for a variety of reasons, some of which are based on false inferences from scientific data.
If somebody were opposed to vaccines because they believed there was insufficient data for them to make a decision about the actual risks, not the benefits, but the risks, would you consider that person an anti-vaxxer?
If they refuse to be vaccinated themselves or refuse to have their children vaccinated, I would call them an anti-vaccination person, yes.
Is there anybody who could refuse a vaccine who you would not label anti-vaxxer?
Yes, if there are individuals who are immunosuppressed, for example, and therefore have a contraindication to certain vaccines, that to me would be a reasonable decision on their part.
But otherwise, you believe that anybody else who refuses a vaccine is doing so based on misinformation?
Generally speaking, yes. Now, as I said before, I can imagine an adult deciding that they don't want the advantages of vaccination for whatever reason. I think the situation for children is quite different because one is making a decision for somebody else and also making a decision that has important implications for public health.
So in the case of an adult, you think it's okay for the adult to make a decision for themselves to take on a risk, even though it could implicate public health, but not the case for a child?
You know, it depends. For example, if you're a healthcare worker and you refuse to be vaccinated against diseases that you could potentially transmit to patients, I don't think you should have the option of making that decision.
Earlier we discussed that there hasn't been a wild case of polio in the United States since 1979, correct?
Right.
Okay. The United States currently only uses inactivated polio vaccine, right?
Yes.
It does not
Sorry, say it again. The United States
only uses inactivated polio vaccine, correct?
Yes.
The United States does not use oral polio vaccine, correct?
Correct.
Okay. If there were an outbreak of polio in the United States,
Yes.
isn't it true that we would have to return to using oral polio vaccine to stop the spread of polio in the United States?
It might well be the case. However, individuals who have received the inactivated vaccines will not themselves get polio. They may get infected and transmit to others, which is one of the reasons why one might resort to OPV. But the individual himself would not be susceptible.
Is that because the IPV creates IgG antibodies in the blood
Yes.
but it doesn't create IgA immunity in the intestinal tract?
Correct.
And it is in the intestinal tract where the polio virus
Yes.
multiplies, correct?
Yes.
So a person vaccinated with IPV can still become infected and transmit polio virus, correct?
Yes, although in point of fact, IPV does protect the nasopharynx. So in this country where hygiene and sewage, et cetera, are good, the possibility of transmitting from an IPV vaccinee is much less than it is, let's say, in Africa, where sewage contamination is great.
When you say nasopharynx, what is that?
The throat.
So you're saying that IPV does create immunity within the throat?
Yes.
Okay. There are studies that show that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And how do those studies make that determination?
Well, by culturing people who are exposed to polio, who have had IPV, and also by showing that antibody diffuses into the throat much better than it does into the gut.
In the Warfel study, I'm sorry, strike that. Do you know the names of those studies by any chance?
Oh gosh, again, they're in the book.
Are they in your book?
Yes, absolutely.
And in terms of efficacy, does IPV vaccination as a childhood last a lifetime?
You know, that's an interesting question, and I think the answer is yes. Studies that have been done have shown quite good persistence of antibody after IPV. Now, does it last forever? I can't say that, but it certainly lasts a long time.
How about 30 years after vaccination? What do you think the efficacy is, approximately?
I would just be totally speculating, but I think most people would still be protected because you don't need much antibody against polio to be protected. Levels of dilutions of 1 to 4, 1 to 8 are probably protective.
But you're not sure.
I'm not sure about 30 years. I'm sure about the levels that are protective.
Right, but 30 years, you're not sure about what % of the people vaccinated are still immune to polio.
No, but I do know that persistence is good, and that the likelihood is that most people, even 30 years, will still be protected.
40 years?
I can't really guess any more than that.
Okay, the data doesn't exist.
No, I
Okay.
don't believe they exist.
Well, what do you estimate is the current efficacy of the mumps vaccine shortly after vaccination?
Oh, shortly after vaccination, there's no doubt that the efficacy is high. It's 80, 90%. And after 2 doses, immediately after 2 doses, the efficacy is very high. Unfortunately, the efficacy diminishes with time, and that has caused a problem in universities that have outbreaks of mumps because the college kids are
No longer immune?
intimately associated. Yes,
Associated?
intimately associated, although the efficacy even then is probably on the order of 70, 80%.
70, 80%. What about 30 years after vaccination? What's the efficacy?
I have no idea.
20 years?
I don't think studies have been done more than 10 years after vaccine.
What do you estimate is the current efficacy of the rubella vaccine 10 years after vaccination?
Based on the data that are available, it is very high. The so-called B-cell memory after rubella vaccine, I'm happy to say, is very good.
How about 20 years?
I think it'll still be present.
30 years?
I think so.
High efficacy still, you think?
I think so.
But no study's been done.
Actually, there are studies, at least 20-year studies. I'm not sure about 30, but immunity is very long-lasting.
And, okay. And the studies would be in your book?
Yes.
What would you estimate is the current efficacy of the measles vaccine 20 years after vaccination?
Well, again, it appears to be quite good. 20 years, I don't have in my head a study done 20 years later, but certainly studies done some time after vaccination have shown good persistence of antibodies. And once again, you don't need a whole lot of antibody to prevent you from getting measles.
Do you know a percentage
Of
of people that are still immune 20 years out from the measles vaccine?
not off the top of my head, but I feel relatively sure that it's quite high.
Is it important to get a tetanus vaccine?
Well, it's important if you don't want to get tetanus, yes.
The tetanus vaccine was introduced into routine childhood schedule in the late 1940s, correct?
Yes.
when the tetanus vaccine was introduced, there were only about 4 cases of tetanus per million people, correct?
If you say so. I don't remember.
You familiar with what the CDC Pink Book?
Yes.
If the CDC book said that it was 4 cases of tetanus per million, would you dispute
Okay.
that?
Well, I'll accept that.
You do accept that. And that's just the number of cases, not deaths, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you think it's a public health imperative for people to be vaccinated against tetanus, correct?
I think it's the wise thing to do if you don't want to be under risk of getting tetanus if you have an injury.
Okay. To prevent something that was a few cases in a million, correct?
Yes, but a deadly disease.
Do we know whether the tetanus vaccine causes more or less than a few cases of serious adverse reactions after vaccination?
I don't believe it causes a whole lot of serious reactions, no.
I'm going to show you what's...
Do you know how much longer we have to go, just so I have an idea?
Yeah, sure. I think that we've only got about 15 more minutes.
That's exactly how much we have left.
Perfect.
So we should be, we're almost done. Can I get a sticker? Okay. The CDC and FDA maintain something called the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, correct?
Yes.
And that's where anybody, including doctors, can go and report what they believe to be an adverse reaction from a vaccine.
Right,
Right?
correct.
There's no, anybody can submit a report, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And the FDA and CDC compile that data and make it available online, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to hand you a what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 46. Okay, and this is a printout of the VAERS data for all adverse reactions reported to tetanus-containing vaccines in the last 10 years. If you take a look, do you see that in the last 10 years there have been 985 deaths reported
Yes.
to have followed any tetanus-containing vaccine?
Yes.
Okay. That would average to about 98.5 reports of death per year
Yes.
over the last 10 years. Okay. And there's also 23,981 emergency room or office visits after tetanus-containing vaccine in the last 10 years.
Yes.
And it also lists, I'll just last one, 1,256 permanent disabilities reported after tetanus-containing vaccine in the last 10 years, correct?
Yes.
That would be about an average of 125 per
Yes.
year, right? But we don't, because these are just reports and not done in some kind of randomized controlled study, we don't actually know whether or not the tetanus vaccine is causing these deaths and permanent disabilities, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But it's possible it could be, correct?
It's anything's possible. Yes.
Okay. Don't you think a study should be done to determine? Strike that. Strike that. Isn't it true that VAERS only receives a tiny fraction of the reportable adverse events after vaccination?
Well, I can't give you a percentage, but all physicians are asked to report putative reactions to the VAERS system. So I don't think the VAERS system covers a tiny portion of alleged reactions. I think rather probably most are reported, but I cannot confirm that.
Dr. Plotkin, I'm going to show you what's been marked as plaintiff's exhibit. (47). This is a report entitled Electronic Support for Public Health Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, correct?
Say it again.
Electronic Support for Public Health dash Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, correct? Let me know when you're ready, Dr. Plotkin.
Well, I'm ready.
Okay. The title of this report, Dr. Plotkin, is Electronic Support for Public Health Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this was a study conducted by Harvard Medical School and the Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it was done via a grant from an agency within HHS, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the purpose of this study was to attempt to automate VAERS reporting.
Yes.
The reason that Harvard did this study and the reason that HHS paid for it, if you look at page 6,
Yes.
do you see where it says fewer than it's right in the middle paragraph, fewer than 1% of vaccine adverse events are reported?
Well, yes, I see the statement. I don't see the reference, but
Okay. Well, let's take a look at the
Yeah.
results of that study then. If you go to the first sentence on the page that you're on right now,
yeah.
where it says results, isn't it true that it says preliminary data were collected from June 2006 through October 2009 on 715,000 patients,
Yes.
and 1.4 million doses of 45 different vaccines were given to 376,452 individuals.
Yes.
So about 376,000 individuals received a vaccine, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Out of these doses, 35,570 possible reactions were identified, correct?
Yes.
So out of 376,000 people that received vaccines, they identified 35,570 possible reactions, right?
Yes.
Okay. And now,
Well, it's out of 1.4 million, which is 2.6%.
doses, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Meaning maybe some individuals had
More than one vaccine.
and had reactions at different times to different vaccines, right?
Yes.
Maybe some people were more susceptible to a vaccine reaction, and so they had a reaction every time they had a vaccine, right?
Well, we don't know that.
We don't know. I mean, assuming that each individual only had one vaccine reaction, then 10% of the individuals would have had a vaccine reaction.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. So, now, at the beginning of this study, the CDC was cooperating with these grant recipients, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and they helped define what is an adverse reaction, right?
Yes.
And they helped define the algorithms to use. Right?
Yes.
And they also helped to define what reports should be excluded, correct?
I guess so.
Okay. What events, I'm sorry, should be excluded. from being considered, reportable, right? Okay.
Yes.
After, however, they collected this data and they generated these 35,000 reports, they then wanted to submit those reports to VAERS and automate it so that those reports could continue to be submitted, correct?
Yes.
But the CDC wouldn't cooperate with them, correct?
Well, I have no idea whether that's true or not.
On page 5, Dr. Plotkin, at the end of the second paragraph, it says does it say real data transmission of non-physician approved reports to the CDC were unable to commence by the end of this project, the CDC had yet to respond to multiple requests to partner for this activity. Is that what it says?
That's what it says.
Okay. So, and this study says that less than 1% of adverse events are reported to VAERS, right?
Well, I have to check that, but I think that's correct.
Okay. Are you aware that there are other governmental reports that make similar estimates for VAERS?
I'm aware that not everything is reported to VAERS, yes.
Okay. But are you aware that governmental reports show that that governmental reports like this one show that the rate of reporting to VAERS is extremely low, and in this instance, they'd say Harvard said less than 1%.
Yes, apparently, yes.
Okay.
However, it has to be reminded that reporting to VAERS is supposed to occur whether or not you think there's been a reaction. So whether or not the reactions are true or not is not something the VAERS decides.
Right. Where's the data? The VAERS data one. Okay. But let's just assume for a second here. So if let's go back to what's been marked as Exhibit 46. Okay. Let's assume that a full 1% of associated adverse events are reported. Wouldn't that take the number of deaths to 98,000 then? That were associated with the vaccine?
I think it's likely that deaths are reported more often than trivial reactions, so I wouldn't be able to extrapolate from that number.
Right.
But, obviously death is more dramatic.
Mm-hmm. Let me show you one final exhibit.
We have 6 minutes left in this.
Okay. I'm going to hand you what's been marked. As Plaintiff's Exhibit 48. This is the VAERS report for all adverse events, for all vaccines, just since January of 2016. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. If this...
My wife is getting upset.
Well, don't tell her you offered her up for a deposition. if this represents even 3% or 5% of reported events, doesn't this concern you in that maybe it really indicates, strike that. It reports 751 life-threatening reactions, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that's only since January of 2016, correct?
Yes.
Okay. If that's a full 1%, then that would be 75,000 life-threatening reactions that would have been reported, correct?
That's the arithmetic, yes.
That's the kind of event that would happen pretty soon after vaccination, correct?
The events that happen after vaccination, yes.
Okay.
But not necessarily because of vaccination.
So, until a properly controlled saline placebo study is actually done, or strike that, until we compare the total health outcomes, strike that. Would you support a study that compared total health outcomes between vaccinated and unvaccinated children, Dr. Plotkin?
Will I support such a study? Yes. If the protocol was scientifically valid, yes, I would support such a study. I don't really put much faith into the VAERS system for a number of reasons, some of which you cited. I take much more, I put much more confidence in the vaccine safety data, which are better controlled and which come from institutions that see large numbers of patients.
Mm-hmm. Would you work to support such a study?
Again, if such a study were scientifically feasible, I would support it, yes.
Don't you want to know what the results of that study show?
If the study is done, yes, of course. Mm-hmm.
In terms of the vaccine safety data link, which you just mentioned, that's not available to the public, correct?
Oh, I think they publicly report in the scientific literature what they
independent
find.
researchers want to get access to the VSD. Well,
I don't know what the circumstances are regarding access to data. I simply don't know.
I won't ask you questions about that if you don't know it. Okay.
Pause the tape for a second.
Why?
I'm trying to pause the tape for a second.
No, that's all right. Is there something you should want to check?
Something to check real quick.
Hmm?
I'm just gonna check my notes real quick.
Okay. Well, I'm done with my questioning, and I will, if opposing counsel intends to ask any question, then I reserve to ask some rebuttal questions as well. But otherwise, I'm done with my questioning for today.
You know what? If Dr. Plotkin's going to testify, I'm going to have him here in Michigan, so I'm not too concerned about it. Let's just call it a day. Dr. Plotkin, I'll give you a call tomorrow if you're available for a quick phone call.
Actually, no. I'll be